Hey, comic book fans, Kevin Given with you once again on a comic book review show. Don't forget to check out my reviews on Comics for Sinners as well as Comic Crusaders websites. If you love comics as much as I do, you're going to subscribe to my channel. I review comics for Comic Crusaders. I also have my own franchises, Adolescent Radioactive Samurai Platypi and Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. They're available on Comics Central, Indie Planet, and Comixology. Check them out. Stay tuned to this broadcast for more information. Also, like the Facebook pages for each franchise. Check out my Patreon site for some neat original artwork and shows that you won't find on YouTube. Today, we're going to review Dark Phoenix. Notice it's not called X-Men Dark Phoenix. We're also going to look at my column, Hollywood's latest attack on white men. White men are the problem, Don Lemon recently griped on CNN. I'm a white man, and somehow I'm a problem. But what does that mean? How am I a problem because of the color of my skin? But isn't Don Lemon dating a white man? So he must be part of the problem his own self. But let's look at what else Lemon said. We need to stop demonizing people. Who are we? Americans? Also, who is being demonized? By his own statement, he wants to single out white men as a problem, thus demonizing us. And it's actually the media itself, which Lemon belongs to, that keeps us demonized, as well as segregated, and always will. Let's go way back to see some examples. I was watching a clip from an old Dick Cavett show which featured Bill Cosby. I know, his name is mud today, but this was 1971. He was describing how the media kept us segregated back then. On the program, Cosby describes backlash to the 1950s television program Amos and Andy.
See, in the 40s and the 50s, most black people were trying to gain acceptance. So the idea was to imitate the black. I mean, whatever you want it to be. You want to be a black businessman, so you spoke as the black businessman would speak, and you would dress as he dressed with the three-piece suits, and you would act that way to gain acceptance. Prejudice and racism, of course, it does not exist in all white people, but there's enough that kicks everybody in the backside so that you know that there are enough people who are against you because you are black, that you become paranoid. I liked Amos and Andy. I did not see them as ignorant blacks. See, but that's a different way that we accept certain things. I mean, there are certain routines that I can tell on a stage which deals with an all-black audience that I would not tell on television. Wouldn't allow it, because there are some white people who would laugh at that and say, yeah, that's them, and that's why they ain't going to get to so far from the sun. You understand what I'm saying? So Amos and Andy had to be taken off.
To the point where the NAACP asked for the show to be taken off the air, even though there were no other programs on television during the 1950s that featured a predominantly black cast. The leaders of the NAACP found the show to be offensive, and the show, which was a ratings winner, was removed. He also described how the news media keeps us segregated. Hold on a second. I grew up watching a lot of sitcoms in the 70s, All in the Family, Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days, stuff like that. But I also grew up watching the urban comedies like Good Times, Sanford and Son, which was my personal favorite. Also The Jeffersons, at least the first few seasons when they had the original Lionel from All in the Family on it. And I always wondered why Amos and Andy was taken off the air pretty much by the NAACP back in the 50s. So I went to YouTube and I watched an old program of Amos and Andy, and I just didn't understand what the problem was, because all those shows I grew up with were comedies, and they made us laugh. And it took me by watching this clip from Bill Cosby on Dick Cavett to really understand the mood and the attitude of that day. Cosby said he liked Amos and Andy, but it had to go because we can't have, white people laughing at us. It's just the whole tension that happened back then, I guess, had a lot to do with it. So you see how African Americans were treated back in the 50s. I mean, when Amos and Andy was in vaudeville, they weren't even played by black actors. They were played by white actors in blackface. So yes, I can understand why there was a backlash. I understand it now. I didn't understand it then because I was growing up watching Fred Sanford, Lamont, J.J. Evans, Florida. And another good one that didn't last long was That's My Mama, was with Clifton Davis. I enjoyed that show. And another show I grew up on was Julia, which was played by Diane Carroll. She had a son. She was a single mother, a nurse raising a son. And I could relate to that because I was an only child being raised by pretty much a single mother. I had stepfathers at times, but they were less than desirable parent figures. So, so I could understand, I could relate to that show. But anyway, getting back on track here to the article, Cosby also described how the news media keeps us segregated. Long story short, he made the point of saying that when a white man commits the same crime as a black man, the newspapers reported it differently. For instance, Mr. Smith murdered so-and-so. Whereas if the person who committed the crime were black, the papers would say, Mr. Jones, who is black, murdered so-and-so, singling out Mr. Jones because of his race. Now, more recently, more articles have been written about what the black community thinks of Jussie Smollett and the Jussie Smollett case. Now, this implies that everyone who is black thinks exactly the same way. This is how the media keeps all of us segregated. I have yet to see an article that starts with, what does the white community think about? They want to put, the black community, all the African Americans in one little box. This is how they all think when they say things like, what does the black community think of Jussie Smollett? And that's why you see, us segregated and separated because of the media. No matter what they say about equality and whatever, it's not there. Now, what I see in today's media seems to be going in the opposite direction of what Amos and Andy did. I see a lot of pandering going on, but how many of these elitists live in neighborhoods that are mixed? And now these elitists in Hollywood are pandering to all sorts of demographics in an effort to be all-inclusive. Now, I have nothing against inclusivity. I'm all for it, but I don't believe you have to pander to any political groups and bend over backward to alienate the audience you already have. But we're seeing just that in today's Hollywood. Major players in Tinseltown are calling out fanboys and calling them misogynist, racist, and all sorts of names because they dislike their movies. Paul Feig, J.J. Abrams, and Rian Johnson all come to mind. Even Ron Howard blamed the failure of Solo, a Star Wars story, on internet trolls. And don't even get me started on the Captain Marvel controversy. But I also recall Josh Trank ranting that if he didn't like his movie, Fant Four Stick, that you were a racist because you couldn't deal with the fact that Michael B. Jordan is a black man playing a white character. Say what? Josh, your movie rots. It had nothing to do with the color of Michael B. Jordan's skin. I like Michael B. Jordan. You took a beloved franchise, one which I grew up with and had every comic book issue of up until about 300. I stopped reading comic books in the 1980s when Jim Shooter took over at Marvel, and that's a topic for a different story. And you completely ruined it by your disrespect for the iconic characters. I blame no actor involved. They were doing what they were told to do. Josh Trank's ignorant direction to them was to not read any of the comics, and thus none of the characters resemble their comic book counterparts. Now, Kate Mara is probably the closest one they had to getting her character right, and is possibly an improvement over Jessica Alba. However, Jessica Alba studied for this part. She colored her hair. She tried to match Sue Storm in every way. So she at least tried to be what the comic books wanted her to be. But making Dr. Doom an internet blogger? What is that? Even the Tim Story movies at least had him as an evil corporate entity. Give me a break, Josh. Incidentally, the only Fantastic Four movie that got Dr. Doom right was the unreleased Roger Corman thing back in the 90s. And, granted, that is not a good movie, but if you look at the Dr. Doom in that movie, he's coming very much closer to what the comic books intended him to be than anything since then. At least live action. I mean, you've got some animated shows, of course, that do Dr. Doom right. Producers with Star Trek Discovery made the off-the-cuff statement that the Klingons in their series represented Donald Trump supporters. This led to a backlash, of course, and the fact that the Klingons were not very well done in the first place, and that saw very few Klingons in season 2, and mediocre to bad ratings. Now, I'm not defending Donald Trump or suggesting that you should like Donald Trump at all, but over 60 million people voted for him. Do you really think that those people are going to watch your show if you're going to compare them to your villains? Of course not. Now, the inclusion of Anson Mount's Captain Pike did help ratings, and the reason for that is Anson Mount is so spot on to Captain Pike that the only way you could get a better Captain Pike was to dig up Jeffrey Hunter himself and bring him back to life. Anson Mount looks so much like Jeffrey Hunter that it was perfect casting But now I'm learning that he's gone from that show too. I heard it's been renewed. That's all I've heard. I don't know when they're going to release any new episodes or anything like that. But I have heard that Discovery has been renewed for those 3 of you out there that want to watch it. And Star Wars. Now we come to Star Wars. Kylo Ren was an overtly angry leader that made stupid decisions at every turn. Even before I knew about this woke politics stuff and how they're like Hollywood is dissing white characters now. I remember sitting in Force Awakens thinking, why is this character so stupid? I liked the movie a lot, but I could not get into the villain because he was just doing everything stupid. Darth Vader was a great villain, which we all love to hate. And no one as stupid as this character, Kylo Ren, could have ever risen to a post of prominence in any type of regime. And don't even get me started on General Hux. What the hell is that character? How in hell did he become a general? Looking at it's like everything that came out of his mouth, everything Hux did was absolutely stupid. And how did he become a general? I don't know. He's stupid because he's white, is what the filmmakers are telling us. But at least J.J. Abrams treated the Han Solo character with a little bit of respect. The iconic character was kept in character until the end. He gave Han a death scene with some dignity to it, as Han tries to convince his son, Kylo Ren, to return to the good side of the Force and become Ben Solo again. The results were boffo box office for The Force Awakens, but Last Jedi, Rian Johnson, completely disrespected the old white dude character of Luke Skywalker and had him behave like a whiny baby who couldn't make the right decision if his very soul depended on it. Even actor Mark Hamill was not thrilled with the direction this character took. Luke didn't care about his own sister and her plight, or the fact that her life was in danger. At one point, we learned that he was actually contemplating killing Ben Solo in his sleep because of his turn to the dark side. Now think about this. From this iconic character, Luke Skywalker, killing Ben Solo in his sleep, a complete disrespect for the character and franchise, which upset most fans to the point where Last Jedi, though the #1 film of the year, made $700 million or so less than The Force Awakens. I also believe that fan backlash, not internet trolls, Ron Howard, against the franchise cost Solo a Star Wars movie to flop, because it really shouldn't have. It's a decent film. But Johnson's sins didn't stop there. He even took the new character Finn, which was one of my favorite of the new characters in Force Awakens, and crapped on him too. Fans and critics alike talked about the disservice done to Finn's character. So Mr. Johnson not only dumped on the iconic characters, but he also pinched an extra low for one of the new characters as well. And looking at the MCU, so far, they've not had any kind of political influence directing the course of their movies. But Kevin Feige is promising to become more inclusive. Will this mean disrespecting some iconic Marvel characters like other studios have done? The aforementioned Fan Four Stick, as well as what Fox has done with, spoiler alert for Dark Phoenix, Charles Xavier and Magneto in their latest X-Men Abomination, and what is being accomplished by all of this political pandering. Failed and lesser box office, plus poor ratings for television series that should be soaring in the ratings. And speaking of dissing old white dudes, another Hollywood reporter recently asked Quentin Tarantino about Margot Robbie's role in the upcoming film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, implying that he purposefully kept her role to a minimum because she's a woman. He rightfully rejected her hypotheses. Are you kidding me? This is the man who gave us Beatrix Kiddo in the Kill Bill franchise. Probably the toughest, strongest female lead in the history of filmmaking. Uma Thurman's character at one point takes out a whole Yakuza gang by herself and without any superpowers. And what did Margot Robbie say? Well, her response was basically, this is what the role called for, and this is what I did. You can have strong leads of either gender or any race and tell good stories, but why do you have to crap on iconic characters such as the aforementioned and expect us to buy tickets to your movies or watch your TV shows? You're not necessarily a racist or a misogynist if you dislike certain films with black or female leads. Catwoman, anyone? Hollywood, a city run by old white dudes, seems to be at war with old white dudes, and quite frankly, I'm tired of it. And that brings us to my review of Dark Phoenix. Major spoilers for this one. It's 1975 and 8-year-old Jean Grey, played by Summer Fontana, is traveling with her parents in a car when they get to an accident which is inadvertently caused by Jean's telekinetic powers. Charles Xavier, James McAvoy, becomes her mentor, and Jean's father Scott Shepard, willingly sends her to his care. Professor X is the only one that can control her powers. We jump ahead to 1992 in an impressive scene where our heroes save astronauts aboard the space shuttle Endeavour. This is where Jean, Sophie Turner, is exposed to the Phoenix, and her powers are strengthened to the point where Charles can't control her anymore. She discovers telepathically that her father is actually still alive after she had been led to believe that he died along with her mother. She grows upset with Charles and tracks down her father. He's shocked and scared that she found him, and the encounter turns nasty. Charles and the X-Men track her down, and, after a huge battle, she winds up killing Mystique, Jennifer Lawrence. Jean finds herself hating what she's becoming and tracks down Magneto, played by Michael Fassbender, in an attempt to find herself and how to control her rage and powers. She hopes that Eric's experiences can help her with her own powers, since he learned to control his own rage. And now, an alien named Vuk, Jessica Chastain, and her followers, members of the shape-shifting Skrulls, no, they're Dabari. I guess they couldn't be Skrulls thanks to Captain Marvel using Skrulls. However, these aliens are closer to what the comic book Skrulls are than what we saw in Captain Marvel. Now, this race has tracked the Phoenix Force to Earth and Jean Grey. Vuk wants the power for herself, and another battle ensues. And the movie continues until we get the final battle, which culminated aboard a train. A very so-so CGI train wreck. Literally. The movie itself is a train wreck. Now let's look at my review. What an incoherent mess of unfinished scenes and identity politics. All the men are ineffectual dolts, while the women are all-knowing and all-powerful. At one point, Mystique even says, "The women are always saving the men around here. You might want to think about changing the name to X-Woman." Gee, remember when men and women worked together as a team, both making mistakes, both learning from those mistakes, and treating each other as equals? It wasn't that many films ago. The name isn't even X-Men Dark Phoenix. Could it be because Marvel Studios' EVP of production, Victoria Alonso, believes the name X-Men is outdated? At any rate, the film succeeds in driving a wedge between the male and female characters. Everyone blames Charles for Jean Grey's predicament, but what was the professor supposed to do? You've got a man who couldn't trust his 8-year-old daughter after he realizes that she's responsible for the car accident and death of his wife. He loves his daughter, but is also, rightly so, afraid of her. At any time she could lash out at him and kill him as well. Charles is the only one with the ability to raise her and keep the world safe from her. There were no other decisions here. Just think of all the awesome themes that could have been explored with just that one scene. But of course none of them are. The script is so obviously a first draft. Why didn't they pay better attention to this? The only thing I can think of is that the sale of Fox to Disney went down either before or during production, so all involved only gave the production half an effort, realizing they would never produce another X-Men movie. The performances are a mixed bag. You have the classic actors who are always great. Hell, Michael Fassbender could read the ingredients to a bowl of cereal and make it sound Shakespearean. But then you have the younger ones, most of whom aren't given much to do. But Sophie Turner, who's given the most to do, is so horribly miscast. I personally have never seen Game of Thrones. I know, sacrilege, but I can't I can't comment on what she's done with that role. But my gut feeling is that she was only cast in this franchise because of her popularity with that show. I don't see her struggle with the Dark Phoenix entity at all in her performance. She's kind of whining about how she can't stop causing damage. For a much better exploration of that theme, watch the second Star Trek pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Superb performance by Gary Lockwood. Some of the action is well done, such as the rescue of the astronauts, while other action scenes are by the numbers, especially the final confrontation on the train. The car accident was almost a complete copy of the one in Shazam, and was done better in Shazam, a film which also underperformed, but will probably end up making more money than this stinker. The final insult to the iconic character of Charles Xavier is the removal of the sign that bears his name, replacing it with the Jean Grey School for Gifted Children. Do I need to bring up the obvious disregard for continuity? These films are supposed to take place in the same universes as the Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen films and evolve into those chapters. They kill off Mystique, who will later rescue Magneto from prison in the first movie. Charles Xavier retires, leaving the school to Jean Grey, even though we get no hint of that in the first movie. Now I can see Charles, her being led to forget all the incidents from this movie, and then later on the Dark Phoenix makes a comeback in X-Men United. So, I can see that. But as far as the rest of it, how can you kill Mystique, who is supposed to rescue Magneto from jail in the first movie? So they said, screw continuity. And just let's go for the jugular. They seem to be saying, we're going to crap all over your franchise and classic characters in the name of politics and inclusivity, which excludes white men. Now please go buy tickets to our movie. Yeah, we're going to rush right out and buy tickets to that convoluted mess. You know, maybe it's not the name X-Men that's outdated. Maybe it's Hollywood itself. I'll give the movie 2 stars for the attempt to make this film watchable by James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. 2 stars, 5.3 rating. From this comic book reviewer. If you love comics as much as I do, you're going to subscribe to my channel. I review comics for Comic Crusaders. I also have my own franchises, Adolescent Radioactive Samurai Platypi and Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter. They're available on Comics Central, Indie Planet, and Comixology. Check them out. Stay tuned to this broadcast for more information. Also, like the Facebook pages for each franchise. Check out my Patreon site for some neat original artwork and shows that you won't find on YouTube. And that was our look at comic book reviews for this week. Until next time, this is Kevin Gibbons saying so long and keep reading those comics.